We're into the second wave of free agency, and the Chiefs are starting to pick up steam. Is this where they build out their roster? What comes next? We're going to get into today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, Chiefs Kingdom, to another episode of Locked On Chiefs, part of the Locked On Network. We're here every day on every platform for free. If you're over on YouTube, click the like and the sub and the bell notification. If you're on audio, go ahead and get subscribed, whether it's iTunes or Google or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd appreciate some feedback as well, like the comments on YouTube and the reviews on iTunes. This is Locked On Chiefs, and I'm flying solo today. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, the home of the Athletic Matrix. We'll get to that in a second. I'm also your host over at RGR Football, my channel on YouTube, as well as the Locked On NFL Draft. Chris is on vacation today, so we're going to get into the details of what I think is the key actual time for the Kansas City Chiefs in this offseason, and it's just getting started now. We're brought to you today by Rock Auto. Everything that they have is an amazing selection for really low prices. It doesn't matter who you are. You can get all the parts you need over at rockauto.com. We'll talk about them coming up later as well. And this is the big thing. The Chiefs are just getting rolling. We said and kind of warned everybody, hey, the initial wave of free agency is not going to be something they can really sink their teeth into. It's going to have to be the second wave and the third wave and see what comes from that. And that's exactly what we've come across to this point. And so while it felt for a long time very frustrating for Chiefs Kingdom that they weren't getting signings and they weren't going after the big names, that kind of died down after they got Justin Reed. I think that went a long way. Now with the Juju Smith-Schuster signing, I think that settles them down more. And those are the two, like, I wouldn't call them marquee, but those are the two big signings for this roster to this point in this offseason. And that kind of settled everything out. But they've actually done some good things since then in order to get to the point where they can build up the middle tier of their roster. Now, does that mean that they've got the high-hitting things done? No. We'll talk about what they still need to accomplish here coming up later in the show. But it does mean that they're doing the work that they have to do to get started. Now, this is a team that didn't have much cap space coming in. They actually had to move some money around in terms of restructures, including Patrick Mahomes, in order to get to the spot where they could make any of these signings. So that is the largest reason why you didn't see a lot of action in the first round. But since then, you're starting to see it come off. And we're going to review in depth what they've gotten to this point. And obviously, Justin Reed, Juju Smith-Schuster, the two big ones. They wrap up a total, I believe, of their first year going to be in about $14 million. I'm sorry, just short of that, 13.75. So not a huge expenditure. And that's exactly what they needed to do. Those, I think those are values at both positions and allowed you to make some headway, stabilize what you're doing. Obviously, with the big departures at both those positions, that comes in to what you're having to do. And those departures being obviously Tyrann Mathieu's departure, amicable or not, it doesn't seem like it is, but you never know. When his market comes in and he is tied up, I think we'll see exactly what that means. But you had to let that happen. So now you have a player that can play at the back. There's all kinds of aspects of what they can do in order to rebuild their dime set that we know Steve Spagnuolo wants to go to. There are a number of players that can help that, but you had to let that come around. You had to let a number of your wide receivers that, quite frankly, even in the congregate, didn't do enough for you at the wide receiver 3 position last year, outside of Tyreek Hill and McCole Hardman, to do enough to make you feel like you can walk into the season without making an upgrade. Now, both of those are draft options. We'll talk about that coming up. But in the meantime, what they've done is that they've lost a couple of guys, and that is Byron Pringle. One of those receivers has signed with the Chicago Bears, with Ryan Poles, the former executive here with the Chiefs, working for Brett Veach. Now he's the GM in Chicago. Lost him. Ended up losing Austin Blythe, who didn't play for the Chiefs hardly at all. It signed with a one-year deal for $4 million in Seattle. So that tells you the Chiefs didn't really make an offer to bring him back. That's okay. They're very young at the interior. and the way that the interior paid off, you can feel good about that. And then the bigger loss, obviously, was the decision on Matthew, but Travarius Ward as well. Another position that's going to have to be addressed as they come up. But they've done some good things as well, and it leaves them room to get into this later tier, the third roundish kind of tier now, where they can start to make some quality signings for depth, for competition to come in. They still need some heavy hitters at the edge position, at the wide receiver position, possibly at safety as well. I don't think the signings are done there. I think you can get some value still in what is out there on the open market. But they've also added to their roster some guys that we do know in bringing back a couple of their players and adding one in particular that I think is an interesting piece of the puzzle that allows them to be multiple in what they do on the offensive line. We're going to talk about all those guys coming up. But, you have to talk at this point of the year. There's a lot of talk about March Madness and what you're going to do at BetOnline in order to lay your money down in a way that makes sense for you. You can jump over there to BetOnline for all the tournament action. There's a whole lot of NFL action as well, whether it's prop bets, draft placement, who signs where. The odds are everywhere. Props, scores, podcasts, news section, all kinds of trending information so that you can make smart decisions when you want to put bets down. Whether it's Vegas or somewhere else, you don't need to play casino games. You might as well put it where it belongs. At BetOnline, you get to head over to that website and use it from a mobile device that's super easy and check all that information, all the current action, all the current trends, and get that done. So I suggest that you do that. I enjoy that. It's over at BetOnline where the game starts. And where the game starts is just that, a starting point. The offseason has just hit a starting point. The first wave is through. I think we're at the tail end of what I would call the second wave now, going into free agency. And that allows, I think, some hunting and actual value to be gained. But I want to mention a couple of things that they got done. They re-signed Mike Burton. That was the first one to fall. Not a position, the fullback, that gets used across the league. You saw Ricard just sign here over the weekend as well. But getting Burton back, core special teamer, a guy that actually proved pretty useful in spot action in 2021. In 2022, he'll be on the roster. And I think that's gives you the variability for the read offense in case of emergency, that kind of thing. So I like that signing. You guys know how I feel about the fullback in general. Then you come back and the question becomes, how important is the right tackle? And we've talked a little bit about that, Chris and I, over the last few days. And it becomes more and more of a concern because of the injury. It's not that you have to go out and get a future right tackle of the next decade. Not in my opinion. I don't think that the organization is there to the point that they think Lucas Niang is either, injury prone or somebody that isn't going to work out. I think it's been a rough start for Lucas's early career in opting out, not being available to train with the team, etc., having the injury last season. I think there is concern about whether the durability is there, but I don't think the team's to the point where they're trying to go out and get a new right tackle one. So I don't anticipate any trade ups or any trades for right tackles specifically. I think there's actually a lot of good depth in the draft that you could select and bring in as a backup for now and let them train as the swing. But in the meantime, they went and they re-signed Andrew Wiley, a guy who has played a significant amount of snaps for this team in order to, again, have that safety line that if his progression is not what they hope, and it was a fairly late injury. So I think that you have to beware of that. Maybe it's not something where Lucas Niang is even healthy enough till week 6, something like that, where you have to have a legitimate starter. Andrew Wiley is the free agent from this team that had the most experience that you could easily bring back and plug back in. Again, not, in my opinion, a starting caliber player, but a guy that gets it done in a pinch and has done that significantly for you at multiple positions. This is a signing of trust, in my opinion, because the organization, Andy Reid and Brett Veach in particular, need to have value in a way that you can trust it. And I think that's what you get in Wiley. What was really interesting is over the weekend, they came back and signed Jaron Christian. And I think that's a developmental player that was with Houston that can play tackle. I think that it's somebody that had a decent grade on prior to entering the league. And so they're following up with what their film grades saw, what their athleticism grades saw, and they're going to continue down that path. It is, I think, hedging their bets. I don't think you're going to see the reinvestment. I don't expect Kyle Long to come back. He is technically on the free agent list. And one of the players we'll talk about in a minute that are still available to be re-signed should the Chiefs want to. But I think what this says is that they're going to go with Wiley as a backup, as Christian most likely a backup. And then I expect them to draft someone, most likely someone that has the athleticism to play a swing tackle role, so that you are designating a developmental player. I think a third or fourth rounder would be my guess. I don't think you spend either 30 or pick 62 on a developmental tackle. I just don't think that's good value, and I don't think they'll do it. But having 2 picks at the end of 3, I think is key, and into the 4th. One name I would put out there, and we'll talk more about him as we get closer, is Abe Lucas from Washington State, who very much in my eyes, because of his ability to move his feet, he's a good athlete, was one of the better tackles at the Senior Bowl in what I still feel was a fairly weakened group, Trevor Penning notwithstanding. I think Penning's a little over bloated, to tell you the truth, in terms of his grade value. But Abe Lucas is a guy that is an athlete. He's not terribly powerful, at least from what we've seen. He reminds me a lot of the way Eric Fisher looked when he came out in the draft. The difference being is this isn't going to be a number 1 overall pick. This is going to be a 101 overall pick or 121. That's kind of the range that I see him in. And so I think that's one name to keep on your list as you're looking through draft prospects. And I can help illuminate some of that if you want to go over and check out the athletic matrix. Right now, you can get a code here. It is at rogueapc.com, and you can use the code locked on to get that. And that will explain where everybody stacks up relatively to each other in terms of athleticism and what are their core functional traits that have to go on the football field for their position. So it's not a one size fits all. It's not edges and linemen have the same criteria as cornerbacks and wide receivers. It is position specific. And I think Abraham Lucas actually put his name in a good light in terms of the way that he tested. Now, that's just one position. It's one of very few on the offensive side that they really do need to look at. Here's the situation currently. Yes, Pringle was signed away by the Chicago Bears, but Demarcus Robinson is still out there. I have heard very, very little in terms of interest for Demarcus at this point. Marcus Kemp, core special teamer, a guy that got on the field every now and then. Another situation where it's not to that point of free agency where those guys are starting to disappear. I think both of them are candidates to come back, depending on how the rest of the wide receiver group straightens out. Gordon is back on the practice squad with a futures contract, so you have that ability to just bring him up. I find that very intriguing because they didn't make that signing for nothing. They've seen a long-term snapshot of Josh Gordon and elected to bring him back. I think that's a significant endorsement of what they feel he still has to offer. So I think there will be a wide receiver chosen in the draft class. I don't know if it's going to be a top 2 now with Juju Smith-Schuster in the fold, because even a rookie of, say, a Christian Watson level, I don't know that he's going to beat out in year 1 Juju Smith-Schuster, Mecole Hardman, and certainly not Tyreek Hill. So that makes a first-round investment on a guy that you know isn't going to be one of your top 3. It makes it a little bit more difficult. So I think what we'll see is maybe one of those third rounders, but definitely a day 3 selection. There's a lot of value in this. And if you didn't see our mock draft from yesterday, go back and check that out, because we had that conundrum and had to get to that point in order to make sure that we're covering our bases there. Now, they did bring back Jody Fortson as well. He has been re-signed. He will be on the roster to start camp, and we'll get an idea of his progression from his injury recovery then. That's very important. Now, there's been a defensive re-signing. We're going to talk about that in here in a minute. And then we have to address, where are they now? What can they do to help the defense? Because there is a lot to get done there. There's just no other way around it. They have parts they have to replace. And just like when I have parts on my truck, you got to go find them. And the easiest way to do that is over at Rock Auto, because they have everything for you. It's super easy. It saves you money, yes, but it saves you time, because you don't have to go into a brick and mortar store. You don't have to go up to a counter and hope that they have something in stock. You get to shop online. You get to see everything that they have for every make and model across the country and have it shipped to you. It saves you all kinds of time, but also up to 50 or even 100% on some parts. They have everything from the tailgate that I destroyed a couple months ago to a simple hubcap that comes off when you're, in 8 feet of snow like I am here. That happens to happen every now and then. They're reliably low for every customer. It doesn't matter if you're a professional or not. You can be just as discounted as somebody that works at an auto parts facility that actually does the work on mainstream or even CDR vehicles, whatever you can come across. They treat everybody the same. They've been in business for 20 years and they're super reliable. All you have to do is go over to rockauto.com and write in that little box that says, how did you hear about us? And tell them Locked On sent you. That would help us. They have amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car is ever going to need. So check out rockauto.com. And also check out the Locked On NFL YouTube channel because they're doing a lot of good work over there. It's a slew of hosts. I used to be over on that show as well before I took over the NFL show. And they get a lot of information of what's going on across the league. It is definitely worth your time to check that out as well. And that brings us back to where we are with this defense. And it's been fairly quiet, obviously, with the departures. And I think some that have been a little bit undersold to this point that we do have to be considered with. First, DeAndre Baker got re-signed to his contract, exclusive rights free agent. Sorry, he was tendered, I guess, technically. So they will have him available. Great sign. Chad Henne came back on the offensive side. I forgot to mention that. And intriguingly, Derek Nottie has been re-signed. I'm happy to see that because I think while Nottie admittedly is only a 2-down player, he does not bring much on third down in terms of the pass rush. He's a consistent and level-headed run defender that actually makes stops. He was second on this team in 2021 with stops in the run game behind only Chris Jones. And he's going to play, I believe, at a 1-year, less than $3 million deal. That is value. That's something we told you about during the season, actually, that Chris and I said. If you can get him back on a deal that makes sense, he's an easy 2-down run stuffer you can plug in, and he plays and he plays and he plays. He's available, he's solid, and he's steady. Is he spectacular? Does he bring pass rush? No. You have to address that. Now, Colin Saunders is still under contract, so you do have that. You have Turk Wharton. There's some development that still has to go on there. I don't think Turk took the step forward that you'd hoped. Neither did Colin in 2021. So I do expect either a lower level signing or a draft selection at the defensive tackle spot, as well as the edge. And we all know about the edge. With Frank Clark back, you have at least a starter level out on that one edge, but you have to go get talent at the edge rush in order to affect all these quarterbacks that are coming into the AFC, not just the AFC West with Russ being in Denver now, but with Sean Watson getting traded into there. I mean, he was in the AFC already, but to what I think is a Cleveland roster that is actually pretty good. And now with him, I think we'll be able to push against Pittsburgh and compete with Baltimore for that division. I think that's an upgrade, and that makes the road to the Super Bowl harder for the AFC. I think Matt Ryan getting traded to the Colts makes the Colts a more consistent and probably higher upside than they were with Carson Wentz. If you look back at the failings of the Colts in 2021, it was mostly on the quarterback, including the loss to not go into the playoffs. So I think that even though Matt Ryan is on his last legs and he's not a dynamic quarterback anymore, he is somebody that is steady, that can get it to your playmakers. And I think that makes the Indianapolis Colts overall better. I talked about that a little bit over on RGR. You can check that out as well. Now, Blake Bell is still out there on the offensive side, but there's a whole slew of players that haven't signed anywhere yet. And a couple that are under the radar. Jaron Reed hasn't gotten any action yet. Is it a possibility to bring him back? It is possible, but I can't see anything over what he signed last year, a 1-year, $5 million. It's got to be less than that. I think we're all waiting for the Melvin Ingram thing. Melvin's going to take his time, as I understand. So it is going to be about Zadarius Smith is being courted by a number of teams right now as I record this on Monday evening. Also, I think the Chiefs like him. I don't know if they're ready to pay him the market value that it seems like he's getting interest in. So that's going to boil it down to lower level. But I do think another veteran is going to be in the mix. And then you're going to hang out and see what Melvin does. I think a draft pick there is paramount in this coming draft. So look for that. We know about Javarius Ward. Right now, your starters are corner L'Jarius Sneed, Baker, and Rashad Fenton. So there's depth there that you need to acquire and continue. And I think they have some, but it is lower level. I don't think there's a starter level beyond those three on this roster right now. So I expect either a low-key signing, likely of a mid-tier veteran, or definitely a draft pick in the top 100 at that position as well. And that brings me to the safety spot. And that's probably the biggest mystery at this point. With Justin Reed and Juan Thornhill, most teams would say we're in good shape. We have our two starting safeties. We'll go into the later free agency or the later rounds to select them. The problem comes with the volume of three safety dime sets that Steve Spagnuolo wants to play. And I do believe that Dax Hill is going to be in the mix for the Chiefs at number 30. And that is a plug-and-play nickel/robber safety that can play a number of different positions. And maybe what that does is Dax Hill becomes your starting nickel, and that allows Rashad Fenton to be your in-box safety, the upper safety that can do a little bit of everything. I like that scenario as well. Fenton's versatility in that defense, I think goes a long way, and it's being underrated. And the reason that I bring that up is because low-key, there hasn't been any action for Armani Watts with the Kansas City Chiefs yet. I do think it's a possibility that he comes back here in the coming week or two in the tail end of wave 3 and into wave 4 of free agency. I think that would be decent value. The question is, do they have that interest? I think that they likely will. I don't think you're going to see Dan Sorensen. I don't think you're going to see Ben Neiman unless somebody's plan goes terribly awry. And I think we understand that you're looking to get younger across the board on this roster. That seems to be the theme for Brett Veach and Andy Reid this year. I agree with that. And I think that that goes a long way towards getting toward that goal. We're going to talk with Matt Derrick tomorrow and see if he agrees and see what he thinks in terms of how do they continue to shape this roster, what's coming next. And that is, of course, as soon as I hit save on this recording, I'm guessing they're going to sign someone tonight. So I will have reaction for you this week. We'll talk with Matt. We're working our way towards getting ready for the draft. Check out the Athletic Matrix at rogueapc.com and use that code LOCKEDON to get more from you. Check out the Locked On NFL show. Thank you for making us your first listen. And if you'd make the draft show your second listen, Crocker and I would definitely appreciate that. We have some great guests every week. John Harris, Rob Rang, Fox Sports, all kinds of stuff. You get a lot of information on that show about what is going to be a very pivotal draft for the Kansas City Chiefs. That's it for me today. I hope that you guys are well. Thank you for like, sub, and hit the bell over on YouTube, as well as your iTunes reviews. Thank you for subscribing on all the audio platforms, as we are free on all of them. It hopefully makes that easier. I hope you guys have a great day. We'll be back with Matt tomorrow. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you then.